Guys, I hope y'all had a great Christmas break. We are starting the beginning of this year with something called scatterplots. So, we are on page 33 of our journal. Yes, you should have a journal by now. You should know where it is. It should be located. Remember, we take the notes. Based on what I've seen on y'all's journal test, I strongly recommend that you watch these videos and take the notes exactly, because some of you are really doing poorly on these tests, which should be, the answers are given to you. Okay? So let's start on page 33 of our journal. All right. Sorry, just hit my mic. All right. Okay, so we're going to start with taking some notes. The in-class students have a little handout like this that we'll be using. So we're going to start with a scatter plot is a blank with points. Okay, so I'll give you a second to get that down. A scatter plot is a blank with points. All right, so we're going to fill in those blanks. It is a graph with points. Plotted, it's a graph with points plotted that shows we're going to draw another line that shows a relationship between two sets of data. So scatterplot is a graph with points plotted that shows a relationship with the two sets of data. Now we're going to draw an arrow to this word relationship, and we have two words that we're going to use for this relationship. There is the word association and correlation. Association and correlation is what we're going to call that relationship. And for 8th grade purposes, correlation and association are going to mean pretty much the same thing. When you get into this a little bit more, there is a slight difference between them, but we don't really need to know that difference for 8th grade, so we're not going to. Association and a correlation. Okay, this is considered, I'm going to have two blanks, and the word there is going to be bivariate. Bivariate data. Because there are two variables. The prefix bi means two. Think of bicycle, two wheels. Bivariate. Variate has the same root word as variable. So two variable data because there are two variables. Bivariate. Okay, if you need more time to copy that down, just go ahead and pause the video now. I'm going to go ahead and go on, and you can push play when you're done. A cluster is a set of closely grouped data. A cluster is a set of closely grouped data. The data can cluster around a blank or a blank. It can cluster around a point in the first blank or a line in the second blank. And yes, it's important that you do the lines, because if I ask you on your journal test to fill in the blank, because I want your journals to match the in-class people's journals as closely as possible. I do write my journal test based on the journal, the virtual journal. An outlier is a data point that is very blank, and in that blank we're going to put the word different. It's very different from the rest of the data in the set. Give you a minute to get that copied down. And then we're going to draw, if you need more time to copy it down, go ahead and pause and push play when you're done. And we're going to draw a little graph. And this is going to be shots made. And this is going to be shots attempted. We're going to do some lines. If you have a piece of graph paper and you want to use it instead, that's fine. This doesn't have to be super accurate. Scatter plots aren't necessarily the most accurate. They're not the most accurate. Every other line I'm going to do 10 on this line, and then I'm going to skip a line, I'm going to do 20 on this line. And then skip a line, I'm going to do 30 on this line. Give you a minute to get that. I can zoom in on it to help you out a little bit. And right here around the 10, I'm going to put some dots. And then between the 20 and 30, I'm going to put a bunch of dots up here. And then I'll put one dot way up here. If you need more time to draw that, then pause it and push play when you're done. So A, our first is going to be to describe any clusters. So we can see that we have a cluster here, and I'm going to circle it. So I'm going to put a cluster around 10. Oop, I misspelled around. Might be easier if I put my glasses on. And then there's a cluster right here, and I'm going to say a cluster around 25. Now I could say a cluster between the 20 and the 30. I'm going to say 25. And we can see that those are kind of grouped together. Now we drew it that way, and I'm going to show you what the actual graph looks like in a little bit. All right, and then B was identify any outliers. Man, I cannot spell, I'm sorry. Identify any outliers. And I can see that this one up here is very different. And so I'm going to point to it and I'm going to say outlier. I'm going to put that there's one outlier. You're not normally going to have more than 1 or 2 outliers. So if you need more time, go ahead and pause and push play when you got it done. Now I know what some of you have been doing. You've been watching the videos, but you haven't been copying any of this down. Guys, you have to have this copied down. If you decide to come back to school, it will be expected that you come back to school with this completed. If you need it for your journal test, so be sure that you're taking care of business. Okay, I'm going to show you what it actually looks like, so you can kind of see. That's what our graph looks like. You can see a nice cluster here, a nice cluster here, and then there's our outlier. I drew our outlier a little bit more out there, but that's okay. Okay. So that is what a scatter plot is, and what some of the vocabulary associated with scatter plots, what scatter plot is. So now we're going to look at a couple more vocabulary. And to do this, we are going to break this, the last, whatever part you have left of that journal page. You don't need a lot for what we're doing. I actually have more than you need, but that's okay. I'm going to draw a line down the middle. And on the left side, I'm going to write the word linear. And on the right side, I'm going to write nonlinear. So I'm going to draw an X and Y axis on this side. And I'm going to draw an X and Y axis on this side. Alright, so for the linear, we're going to draw dots where they are on a pathway that kind of looks like it's all maybe around a line or near a line. So there's my linear. And I can see that this, even if I put some more down here, this is kind of along a line. Versus a nonlinear, which I'm going to make my dots go in the shape of a backwards C, kind of. If it helps, you can draw the line first and then draw a bunch of dots around it. That's what mine looks like. This is what the actual one that students in class are getting a copy of look like. Okay. So a linear one is when I draw a line, for the most part, all of those dots are going to go around that line. Okay, it's not going to be a perfect line because it is a scatter plot. And you can see that the copied one down here makes a little bit more of a curve actually. But in general, it still makes a nice little line. Well, this one has a very definite curve in it, so it is non-linear. So scatter plots is a graph of plotted dots that shows a relationship between a set of data. And it's a bivariate because it's two variables. We can see it has an x and a y. And we can say that this one clusters around that line if we want to. We don't really have any outliers. We don't have any of them that are just way out there and are different. And then we can look at scatter plots as linear or nonlinear. All right, so I'm going to go to the left side of page 33. And the last thing we're going to look at is association. Okay? So I'm going to start with positive association. Now I told you, you can see it as association, you can see it as correlation. You see it using both. Both of them are talking about that relationship, what's happening. Okay, so we're going to draw backwards L, which is our x and y axis, just looking at one quadrant. And I'm going to do some dots, kind of like the last one I did. They are going to be going up, kind of like that. Alright, so I'm going to put an asterisk, that's a star, a stick star, I guess is a good way to think of it. And as x blank, y blank. Okay, so if I look at my points, they are going further along this x-axis. Here's my x-axis. And as x increases, I can see that my y's are also going up. So if I look at this point to this point, my x went up, but my y went up. So my y also increases. As my x increases, my y increases. And we're going to look at a real world example. And in class, we're going to be talking about, they're going to be coming up with, I'm going to give them one and then they're going to come up with some other ones. But the real world example we're going to look at is as your age goes up, so as you get older, your height goes up. So as you get older, so as your age increases, your height also increases. Now, yes, there is a stopping point to that. Of course, at some point you say, hey, I'm done growing. But in general, if we're looking at childhood, as you get older, your height goes up. So that is a positive association, a positive correlation. All right, our next one is a negative association. Again, I'm going to draw a backwards L. But this time I'm going to start up high. Oops, sorry. And my dots are going to go down. Again, I made this one linear. Give you a minute or so to get your own graph written. If you need more time, go ahead and just pause the video now and push play when you're done. We're going to do a little asterisk, a little star, stick star. And again, we're going to do as x blank, y blank. So I can see that if I look at this point and this point, my x got bigger, so my x increases. But I can see that it went down. My y decreased. Then we're going to look at a real-world example. Give you a minute to get that copied. Okay. We're going to stick with age. As your age goes up, the number of toys you have, goes down. We know that if you look at a toddler, they have tons of toys. But as you got older, you got less and less toys. And so by now, in 8th grade, you have less toys that you play with. And then by high school, you even have less. Okay. You can also look at, these a lot of times are good to look at in time. So some examples we may think of in classes, the longer time goes on, if you're trying to lose weight, maybe the less weight you are. Or sometimes these are just sometimes really good to look at time. But yeah, and age is also a good one. All right, and our last one is no association. And this one, you're going to be happy to know, is the easiest graph to draw. Because I am literally going to put dots everywhere. They're going to go. There is no pattern at all to them. I'm just going to put dots. Now you also notice a lot of times with scatter plots, there's usually a lot of dots. It's not one of those things where there's usually just a couple of dots. This is a good graph to use when you're looking at a lot of data. And we have an asterisk. And we're going to say there is no relationship between my x and y. There's no relationship. There's not a movement that's the same. If I look at this point to this point, my x increased, my y increased. But if I look at this point to this point, my x increased, but my y decreased. So really there is no relationship there. And so real world example. your shoe size, and your favorite number. And even we realize that our shoe size has nothing to do with what our favorite number is. There's no relationship there at all. And so this is when we are graphing something that has nothing to do with anything at all. And that's where we're going to finish today on scatterplots. Sorry it is a lot of writing for y'all. It always is. As always, if you would like to be able to come pick up the copies, you're welcome to come pick up the copies of these. Just to let you know, if that's easier for you. All right, so scatter plots. We're going to continue with scatter plots. We're going to be looking at scatter plots for quite a few days. Learning to make predictions about them, learning to write equations from them, things like that. As always, if you have questions, please send them to me through email or Teams. I check email more frequently than I check anything. I don't usually check my phone too much during the school day. I check Teams regularly, but I honestly check my email the most. So if you have a question, please send it through email or Teams. It's probably the best bet. Be sure you got all this written down. You can go back and watch the video as many times you needed. Get what you needed from it. And you'll have a great day.